Alright guys, we're back with another video, and today I'm going to walk you through in how to replace an inner tie rod on any vehicle. Even though I'm working on a G37 right here, this is pretty much standard for every vehicle. If you have a different model, a Honda, a Nissan, a Chevy, it doesn't matter. What I'm about to show you, it's pretty much universal. So this is what it's going to consist of. It's pretty straightforward. This is an inner tie rod, the outer tie rod, you install it right here. I'm going to show you how to do it and how to get close enough to limp your way into a alignment rack, because once we touch this, once we mess with any of this, you are going to have to align it. So there's no way around it. You have to align it. You have to readjust everything, because we're dealing with the steering here and you could end up with a big mess. And let me show you what I'm talking about. So this vehicle was lowered. I did lower it with coilovers. When I took this vehicle to get aligned, I wasn't able to because the inner tie rod was bent. They couldn't do anything about it. They will not align it. So I said, I'll do it at a later time. Well, the later time is now, but let me show you what's happened here. Whenever you're dealing with any type of suspension changes, any type of geometry, you're changing anything on the vehicle when it comes to steering, lowering the vehicle or anything, this is what you could end up with. Look at this uneven wear that we have going on. Now, this vehicle does sit lower. We're going to take a peek at the rear tires really quick, and you're going to see that the unevenness is really with the toe. Let me show you. So here we go. This is the left rear tire, and you can see the wear is pretty even. Even though the tire sits a little cambered, it is nothing as aggressive as what we got going on. And that's because the toe is off in the front. So you can see that we have the rims in the rear and we have these stock wheels in the front. And that's because both of the fronts are gone since I did not align it. So when you do this job, even though we're going to get as close as possible, you're still going to have to go to the alignment place. You could go to any shop and they could do it, or you could do a string alignment, which could be a little bit tricky, but you need to align it. This is something I emphasize. You're not going to be able to get away with this without aligning it. So basically right now, I just have to remove this tire so I could access all the components I need to break loose. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay, so these are the components that we're going to be touching today. We're going to be breaking loose this nut right here, this lock nut, and we're going to be replacing that inner tie rod. So this is your outer tie rod and it attaches right here. So we're going to have to loosen this nut right here. We should have, this should fall, and we're going to count the turns and we're going to replace this. So I'm going to go ahead and walk you through that. So the first thing I'm going to do, since the steering, it's straight so I could have more access to it, I'm going to turn the steering wheel all the way to the right hand side. So now that we have turned the steering, we have better access to the whole steering rack component. So we have the outer tie rod, like I was saying before, we have the inner tie rod. So right now what I'm going to do is release this cotter pin right here. I'm going to bend it back and I'm going to loosen this nut. You can at times salvage this and make it work for a while, and you can reuse it, or you can install new ones whenever you're doing this job. Sometimes, depending on the shape that they're in, I will reuse them if I have no choice, no other choice, but a lot of the times I do replace them. So just like that, I got them out. So remember, they're going to be bent. You're going to have to bend them back and then pull through the other side. So sometimes they can get jammed in there and you will have to cut them out, and you have no choice but to replace them. But this one's a little worn out. Sure, I could reuse it, but I'll probably just install a new one. Okay, so the next thing we're going to be doing is we're going to be breaking loose the lock nut. So the lock nut is right here and it sits right against the outer tie rod. So I'm going to go ahead and break this loose. Now, the reason why I'm doing this first is because once you remove it from here, you're going to have a hard time breaking it loose. You're not going to have the leverage. This is going to be loose on you. So you break this loose first. Let me get a good position here. Okay, so now it's broken loose and you can see it freely moves back and forth. Okay, so that's done. So now I'm going to remove the clamp that sits on this boot for the inner tie rod. I'm just going to remove this clamp right here. Sometimes if someone's been in here before, you will not find a clamp. You'll find zip ties, you'll find something, or you might not even have a boot. Sometimes people forget to put these back on or they break. So if you don't have one of those, try to replace it, install one, because this keeps all the debris and any of the lube that the rack needs, it keeps it inside. So it's important to install this boot back on. The rear of the boot has, in this situation, a wire clamp. Okay, they have twisted it up and it's holding this boot in place. So sometimes you will find clamps, you will find zip ties as well, or you'll find nothing. But in this situation, we have this wire clamp and that works just fine. You could sit there and twist it back to salvage it, or you could decide to cut it off and install something else. Whatever you decide to do will work just fine. Okay, now that it is loose, you can see this is part of the rack and this is the outer tie rod right here. This is the part that we're going to be breaking loose. We're going to be loosening this, and I don't know if you can see it on the video, but this is bent, and I'll show you once I remove it. But now that we're this far ahead, we're going to go ahead and loosen this nut and start to back this off and turn and count the turns. So now I'm going to go ahead and remove this nut right here. Just like that. Now, there are different ways in how to remove the outer tie rod from this spindle. Now, sometimes you can use a tool that presses this out. You could install this nut back on upside down. So make sure that you don't damage the upper part. So you can install this upside down just like this. And then you could hit this with a hammer. There's also other tools that you could put in here with a fork and pull it down. Whatever you decide to do will work just fine. There is an old trick that if you hit this right here, right at the right angle, this vibrates and it just pops down. I used to use that many times as a tech. Now, like I said, whatever you decide to use will work just fine. At times, these can be stubborn and you will fight it at times and you can't break it loose. So you're gonna have to purchase an extractor tool, or you're gonna need to do something else. I will have a picture and a link in the description just in case you run into a situation like that, what type of tool you could use to remove this. I am just gonna use a hammer, and if it's pretty stubborn, I'll stop and I'll figure something else out, but I'm pretty sure that this is gonna break loose with a hammer. And it has. That was pretty easy. And now we have this whole guy loose. And you can see, once you have it loose, if you hold the back of the tie rod, the inner tie rod, you could spin this, you could rotate this, okay? Don't touch anything else right now. Just hold it here, just put it down, and you're gonna wanna grab a piece of paper. If you have a good memory, if you can remember this, you remember it, but grab a piece of paper, grab a marker. When I used to do this in a professional setting, I just used to write it somewhere in the chassis, somewhere underneath with a Sharpie or paint marker, and I just used to write how many turns. I will write 17, 21, whatever turns that you count. This is key right here. This is what's gonna be able to help you limp your way into an alignment rack. Because if this is off by a turn or so, you know, you could be, when you install this, you could be off by 2 turns. So you could just have it like this, you're off by 1 turn, okay, not that bad, but once you start to get 2 turns, you're gonna feel that the steering is gonna be off and your tires are gonna be, you're gonna be shredding your tires. So I just grabbed myself a piece of tape, I placed it right here, and then once I count the turns, I'm just gonna write it on this tape, and then I can remove the tape when I'm done. So just gonna go ahead and count the turns. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Okay, so right around 15, 14. So I'm gonna go ahead and write 15 right here. So now I know how many turns I need to turn to get it close. You're gonna get it close, you're not gonna get it perfect. Okay, so we have the locking nut right here. You're gonna have to remove it all the way off. You could zip this out with the impact gun, or you could do it by hand. we're gonna go ahead and hit it with the impact gun and see if we can remove it quicker. So here we go. Place that there. Now I could remove this whole boot out of here. So now we have the inner tie rod exposed, and you can see how it's bent. This is why I was not able to get this vehicle aligned. This was bent, and I said I would just do it at a later date, but I'm running into complications because of that. So let's go ahead and remove it from here. Okay, whenever you're doing a job like this, there is a special tool for the inner tie rod. I did used to have it, and I lent it to someone and they broke it. They gave me the money back, and I decided it wasn't worth me purchasing one because I could use something else. And what do I mean by that is you could either use a big crescent wrench like this, pair of channel locks, or this heavy duty vice grip style tool, which I don't know the name of it. I'll figure it out so I could post it for you guys. So this is what I used to use majority of the time to do these. They work very well, and once you start clamping down, it just creates more force and it doesn't let it slip on you. So I'm gonna raise up the vehicle a little bit more because I do need more accessibility to be able to put my body underneath there. So I am gonna mention this since you are probably working in your driveway, or maybe you're up in the lift. You're fortunate enough to have a lift and you're working underneath there. If you're working on the driveway, if you're working on the floor, make sure you put something underneath there that's going to keep the car from crushing down on you. Put a jack stand, put something in place. Safety is first, and you want to make sure that you live to finish this job. So key right there. So right now I have all of my jack stands occupied, and I just simply put this rim and tire underneath the vehicle just in case something was to happen. That rim is going to keep the car from crushing me. So you could always improvise like I am right here. So, and what am I using those jack stands for? Well, it's for our Project Miata, and right now it's lifted up because I am installing a turbo. Check this project out. You might be interested in seeing what I'm doing. All right, whenever you're replacing this inner tie rod, you can use a special tool, and the tool allows you to insert it inside here and you could remove it. Sometimes you have to use it because there's components that are in the way. In the likely scenario that you cannot break this loose because these are very tight and you're supposed to install Loctite on it, you could put a crescent wrench like I have, and you could hit it. You could hit it in the bottom with a hammer, and I'll demonstrate what I'm talking about. For the initial removal of the boot and removal of the outer tie rod, it is a good idea to push this steering rack all the way out. But when you're starting to put a load and pressure on this, the steering, the rack itself, and the shaft, this push rod that comes out, it is a good idea to insert it back in or turn the steering wheel the other way so you could have as little bit as possible of movement when it comes to like removing this, because you're going to see you're going to put a lot of stress on this whole component. So if this is really tight on you and you don't have enough leverage underneath the vehicle, you could hold a crescent wrench like this and you could break it loose this way, like that. That's what I had to do right now in this situation. Now, like I said, it is a good idea to insert this all the way because you don't want to damage any of the gearing here for the rack and pinion, and you want to create as little problems as possible whenever you're doing a job. So that's just a quick tip in how I would do it and how I would go about it. Sometimes you do need to put a little bit of heat on here because they are tight. I have ran into that situation. So just be aware of what could happen. Okay guys, this is the part of the video that I always say to compare the parts. In all my videos, every time we're replacing something, I always say compare the part that you're removing. And I wasn't able to compare the part until I removed it. But I ran into this situation. Right here, we have the part that I started the video with. This one right here does not match the original one, okay? The threads are not the same size, it's not the correct length, and this doesn't match the vehicle. So you can see that doesn't even work. So I had to stop everything I was doing in the middle of filming this, and I ran out to the parts store and I got the right one. So the other one I'll replace The other one I'll return later, but now let's finish this job. So you might run into the situation, and I know it's frustrating at times because I'm frustrated right now. And a lot of the times when you order things from a parts store or you go pick it up, sometimes, I don't know why, the guys in there, they don't give you the correct items. They don't send you the right things in the mail. For whatever reason, they misplace it, or I don't know what's going on. So if you run into this scenario like I have, take a deep breath, punch your fist through a wall, and then keep going. So majority of the time, I would say add some red Loctite, and that's what they have gave us. This is the same brand right here, and they gave us some red Loctite right in here in this situation. But in this brand new part, I can see it has a bunch of blue Loctite right in here. So we're not going to add the red. We're just going to go with the blue. Majority of the time, it is red. You're supposed to run the red, but they already have produced us with some Loctite right on the threads, and it's going to be fine. I don't want to cross-contaminate anything. I could wash this off and then keep going, but it's going to be just fine. So red is what's recommended. So for this part, it's pretty straightforward. You're just going to insert it in here, and you're going to make sure it catches, of course. Okay, so you're just going to go as tight as possible. There's always torque specs for any of this, but it's going to be very difficult to really torque things down to specs when it comes to inner tie rods. You can have the tool in here, and then you could put a torque wrench in the outside, but what I like to do is just go as snug as I can before I break something. So use your best judgment with this. Don't overdo something that you're going to break anything, and if it feels like you're getting out of hand, just slow things down and make sure you don't break anything. So I'm just going to go snug. I'm just using my crescent wrench here to snug it up, and you can see how much flex I'm having on this shaft, on this rack. Okay, you want to keep that in mind. You don't want to be bending it this way. You could damage this whole mechanism. Like I said, if you're going to put a lot of load, you're going to put a lot of tension, you want this as close as you can to the inside. So you would turn the steering wheel the other way. But I think we're going to be fine. I know what I'm doing majority of the time, sometimes. So I'm just going to snug this up, and we should be able to move on to the next phase. So let's see. So there we go. That thing is not going anywhere. It's nice and tight. So now I could go ahead and slide the boot on. So now we're sliding this boot back on here. Okay. Just like that. Okay. It's going to be difficult to get it over this little lump, this little bevel on here. So you could put a little bit of grease here, WD-40, so it could slide better, but you can see, with just a little bit of force, I was able to install it. So now I'm installing my clamp back on. Now you could use the clamp that you removed or install a zip tie. It does work. The zip ties do hold. I've done it before. In a pinch, that's probably the best case scenario. I am going to use this wire that they have installed here. I am going to twist it back, and it should be just fine. You can run a zip tie back here. You can. I've done it. So you can see the boot, it's stretched out, but I was able to push it all the way back, and it's back on the lip. The biggest thing is to protect this mechanism inside. You don't want any water or any of the grease coming back out of here, because there is a little bit of lubrication inside here, and you want to keep that inside and keep all the debris from going inside there. So put the boot back on. You're better off. In the process of installing the wire back on, it broke, and I am using a zip tie. So basically you just get a zip tie, you loop it around the back of the boot, and you make sure you're in the right lip. You can see when this steering rack pushes in and out, this boot, it's not going to come loose. So now I'm just going to put this clamp here. You can run a zip tie here. You don't have to use this clamp. And now I'm ready to install the outer tie rod. So now we install the locking nut inside here onto there, and you're going to go back just quite a bit, you know. So this is why we wrote down how many turns, because I had to stop and run to the parts store. There's no way I would have remembered that. I could have played back this tape, I could have played back the video and figured it out, but it's a good thing I wrote it down. That's why you should write it down. So now I have the outer tie rod. I'm gonna go ahead and inspect it and make sure everything is in good working order, because I don't want to have to do this again. So what I'm looking for is this boot right here. It is not broken, okay? In some situations you might have the ability to put some grease in here. There might be a grease fitting and you could insert some more grease, but this boot's not broken. There's plenty of lubrication inside there. It looks like it's in decent shape, and I'm gonna go ahead and install it. So I'm gonna go ahead and start counting the turns, starting with up here. It's gonna be towards the top. So I'm gonna go, as soon as it starts threading, as soon as it starts to catch the threads, I'm gonna start counting the turns. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. Oh, 15. It's 15. I went too much. So we're 15 turns into this tie rod. So is this dead on? No, it's not. It just gets me close enough. So that's why you're counting the turns. That's why you have to do the alignment, because it's not going to be perfect. You should, right after you do this, you should basically just drive it over and get your alignment done. So in the scenario that you do have the wheel completely crooked and you have done something wrong, try to retrace your steps and try to figure it out. You could kind of measure from a component on one side of the vehicle, like your subframe, from one side to the other. You can measure from, let's say you're taking a measurement from this subframe to the inner rim, and you could take a measurement and you do it on that side, on the passenger side, and then you would take an educated guess in how far off you are, just to limp it there if it's really off. That's if in the case that the steering wheel is straight, one tire is pointing straight and the other one's in or out, you know, you would be able to take a measurement and take an educated guess so you could limp it there. So if you do the turns, if you count the turns, you're going to get very close and you should be fine. Should you go all week long driving in it like this? I wouldn't. Should you wait a whole year to get it replaced, to get it aligned? No. So those are just tips I'm giving you. Whatever you decide to do is up to you. Now that I have this installed, this locking nut isn't tight yet, but I am going to want to, before I tighten this, okay, I'm going to want to install this back on the spindle, just like this, okay? So it's back installed. I'm going to put the nut back on there. And now I'm going to tighten it down, because now this component, it's going to help keep leverage on here so it doesn't spin on you. You can put a wrench on these tie rods. You can put one here and tighten this down, but this, with this component being installed, it just helps keep everything from flopping on you when you're installing it. So I'm going ahead and I'm holding it down with a wrench right in here, right inside this groove, and I'm just going to snug it up and put it tight, just like that. Do you have to hold it with the wrench here? You don't have to, because this is going to help keep this in place, but I just like to do it just so I don't put stress on this outer tie rod bushing and fitting right in here. Okay. So now I'm going to go ahead and install the nut back here on the push rod. So we have a new cotter pin that I'm going to be installing. Could I have reused the old one? Yes, I could have reused it, but I have a ton of these and I might as well just replace it with a brand new one. So you just insert it back in here and you give it a bend just like that. And I didn't have my hammer in hand, and I'm just using the outer tie rod, the inner tie rod to bend this back. So just like that, it's installed. This is going to keep the nut from spinning off. This is a safety feature. You should always install it. So there we go. We installed a inner tie rod. Like I said before in the beginning of this video, this is universal. You could practically use this on any vehicle. I have done many makes and models, and this is always the scenario that I run into. To replace the boot, to remove the boot, it's the same. To remove the inner tie rod, it's the same. The outer tie rod, it's basically all the same. It's almost like universal throughout the vehicles. What you will find differently is components, you would find subframes, you will find all sorts of obstacles in the way when you're replacing this. That's mainly the difference. It's pretty much a universal thing. So I hope this video was useful for you. I hope you found this useful in replacing your inner tie rod. So if you would like, I would say subscribe to this channel, because I have tons of videos coming up next, and there might be something in there that you might find useful in replacing or repairing or learning about. And I also have a ton of builds that I'm doing all at the same time that I'm repairing all this. So check me out, subscribe, give us a like. The least that you could do if you want to support us is give me a like, so somebody else can find this video in the algorithm. So we'll see you in the next one.